Hello everybody, welcome back to another tier list of Warhammer 3, and this time I'm doing the High Elves. I'm doing the High Elf units and their heroes, so all of their mages and all of their lores of magic. The caveat being I'm not including the Regiments of Renown or the special units that like Eltharion gets, or I don't know if Olithanar gets any special units or not, but I'm not including them. So prepare yourself for another completely objective tier list. 100% objective, not at all my own opinion. No, I'm just kidding. This is 1000% just my opinion, and me playing the High Elves, this is my preference. And so I have a feeling that like 75% or more of you will probably say my choices are really bad, and that's totally okay. You know, feel free to let me know your thoughts and how you guys play the High Elves, but I'm pretty much a creature of habit when it comes to playing High Elves, so I tend to always do the same thing. I don't usually branch out. I don't know if I should, maybe I should, but I have played them quite a bit, so I'll just share my opinion on some of these units. I will say I have not thought about this ahead of time, so I am literally just sitting down here and I'm just gonna give you my gut feeling on these units and how I play with them, and who knows, maybe I'll get it wrong, but we'll see how it goes. I did have to make a cheat sheet for myself though, because I honestly, looking at these images, I can't easily look at them and know who is who because they're all very similar. So I will be using my cheat sheet there. But without further ado, I think we can go ahead and jump in and get started here. So I have these lined up in the order that they show up in the game. So I have infantry, and then I have missile infantry, and then I have cavalry and chariots, and then missile cavalry and chariots, then monsters and war beasts, artillery, or maybe war beasts start with artillery. Regardless, they're not, because High Elves only have one artillery, and then I obviously have the heroes at the end. So hopefully I've got these in order. If not, forgive me. But I also did find that Tier Maker has a presentation mode, which is a lot cleaner to play around with. So this is kind of nice. All right, so now let's go ahead and get started here, and hopefully I can get through this fairly quickly. The first one that we've got here is just your standard spearmen. So this is a pretty standard unit, anti-large with shields. I actually don't mind the spearmen. I feel like they perform pretty well, and I tend to recruit them until I can't, or I'm sorry, until I can get better units, obviously. That's kind of a stupid thing to say, but I don't shy away from recruiting them like I do with some units and other factions. So I will say spearmen are a B tier for me. Like I said, pretty standard unit, nothing fancy about them, nothing bad about them. They do their job well, so I don't mind them. Moving on to rangers, this is going to be embarrassing, but I'm probably going to have a lot in the never use category because, like I said, I'm very much a creature of habit. So I don't feel like it's right for me to judge them in like a lower tier category just because I don't play with them very often. So I'm going to put them in the never use column because I honestly can't even remember the last time I used rangers unless they were put in my army by default. And then they usually die. And then I usually put a different unit in their place. So next up we have the White Lions of Trace, and this one's difficult because ordinarily, like, I think they suck. Like, I'm not a big fan of the White Lions. We'll get to the War Lions. The White Lions of Trace, I feel like they're only really viable with shoot, I just blanked on his name. The White Lion. What's his name? Is it Alistair? Alistair? Yeah, I think that's what it is. Anyway, he's the one that buffs them a lot. So if you have him, they're better. But I have tried to make like armies around them, like given him like White Lions and War Lions and all of that. And it's still, I I don't see them perform super well. So yikes, I'm not sure. I kind of want to put them... Will you guys hate me if I put them in D tier? So like if they're in Alistair's army, then I would say probably B or C. But just like on the whole, with like any other, like with any of the legendary lords, like I just don't think they perform well. So that's that. Next up we have Silver and Guard, and honestly, like I think Silver and Guard are maybe better than Spearmen. I can't remember the exact stats on them, but they are, I believe, a higher tier unit and more expensive. So I don't usually play with them, so I'm going to actually put them at C tier. I don't think they're bad necessarily, but I just don't think they're cost effective, because if I remember correctly, at the point where I can recruit Silver and Guard, I think I can get Lothern Sea Guard, and I just much prefer Lothern Sea Guard, so it's a little spoiler for upcoming units. So I'll put them in C tier. And then we come to the Phoenix Guard, which, again, I don't ever really play with them. They're not bad, if I recall. Like, I don't know if I should put them in the never use, but like typically my late game armies are not, they don't have Phoenix Guard. So I don't know. I think Tyrion buffs them. I could be wrong on that. I can't remember. Like, I love playing Tyrion, but boy, it's been a minute since I've really, really focused on playing him, and actually played him for a long time, like a long campaign. So I'll put them at, as never use, because I really don't ever use them. So next up we have the Sword Masters of Hoeth, and I think this is one that Teclis buffs. He's all about like the lore masters and such, and I mean, they're not bad. I don't usually go out of my way to recruit them. In Teclis's army they might be pretty good, so I'll probably put them as C tier. Maybe that's unfair, but I mean, they're not usually my melee unit of choice if I have the choice. So that is our melee infantry so far. So we're not looking too great on the melee side. But as you guys probably know from watching me play, I'm typically more of a ranged focused player anyway. So the ranged characters might be a little bit better in my opinion. So archers, I'm going to put archers at, let's see. Honestly, I like archers. So I might put them at A tier. And then you have the archers with light armor, which, I mean, maybe they should be A tier and the regular archers should be B tier, but I'm going to put them both at A tier. These guys I think are a little more expensive, and there's not that much of a difference. Like, again, they get some armor bonus, but if you have a front line, like early game, if you have spearmen or even like regular Lothern Sea Guard, these guys really shouldn't be getting into melee all that often, so they can just stand back and pepper enemies with their arrows. So really, it's kind of a toss-up. I think they both perform pretty well in my mind. These guys, the regular archers, may just be a bit more cost-effective. Now we come to the Lothern Sea Guard. So you have the regular Lothern Sea Guard, which I will put up here also in A tier, because I like to play with them, and I think this is one that Tyrion boosts. So his armies, for me, usually have a lot of Lothern Sea Guard. I honestly wouldn't even mind doing just Tyrion and like a butt ton of Lothern Sea Guard, because that's how much I like them. But for me, the Lothern Sea Guard with shields, I'm gonna put that as S tier, because again, that's like one of my like chef's kiss armies with Tyrion is just like a bunch of Lothern Sea Guard with shields, so they have that missile block chance. I think they do really well. They're good in melee, they're good ranged. Overall, I just really like playing with the Lothern Sea Guard with shields. Next we come up to the Shadow Walkers, I think they are, and this is where people might get a little mad at me, but again, like, I just don't play with them ever. I haven't played a Lithanar, and I think that's where they shine. So I'm going to put them in the never use because I really can't think of the last time I used Shadow Walkers. Again, maybe I recruited like the Regiment of Renown and played with that, but like I don't remember enough about it to make a good judgment on them. So I will put them in the never use column. And then there's these guys, Shadow Warrior. Oh no, I got this backward. These are Shadow Warriors. These are Shadow Walkers. And I'll just be completely honest with you here. I was pulling up the unit cards to put them in Tier Maker. I don't know if I've ever seen this unit before in my life. Like, I don't know if this is a new unit or if I've just been completely blind to them this entire time. I don't know if there's something special I need to do to get them, but I looked at this unit card and I was like, what the heck is that? Like, maybe they changed the unit card, but I literally have no idea what this unit is. So I'm going to put them in the never use because I didn't even know they existed. So there's that. Now you come to the Sisters of Avalon, and obviously 100%, like, if this is the S's of S tiers for me. If you play Alariel, Doomstack, Sisters of Avalon, like, without question, hands down. They are the reason why I bought the one DLC, was I wanted to play with the Sisters of Avalon with Alariel. Like, they're just the best. They probably outrank the Lothern Sea Guard. Again, if you could have an SS tier, they're SS tier. Love them. Always play with them. Do whatever I can to recruit them. Fill my armies full of them. Like, just really great units in my opinion. Alright, now moving on to our cavalry and chariots. So this is going to be fun because we all know that I just love cavalry and chariots. And I'm being completely sarcastic because I don't love cavalry or chariots. If I had to guess, I would say that cavalry probably outrank chariots, but not by much. So first up here we have the Illyrian Reavers, and I think I've played with these a bit because they're usually like a starting unit in some of the factions. So I'm going to put them as C tier because, I mean, I guess they do what they're supposed to do. I don't know. I'm tempted to put them actually down at D tier because there's just better. I feel like there's better cavalry. Like, obviously the next one up is the Silver Helms, which I'll probably put Silver Helms as C tier. Like, I don't go out of my way to recruit them, but they're not bad. And then there's the Ithalmar. No. Yeah, the Ithalmar Chariots. Where's this Tyrion? No, this is Ithalmar. If I got these two mixed up, I apologize. This is the melee variant. I can't remember. I think it's Ithalmar. I don't ever play with them. Like, I really can't tell you the last time I played with them because I don't usually recruit chariots. So there's that. After them, we have the Silver Helms with shields, which I think the shielded variant is just better. I can't remember. It looks like these guys have a lance, whereas these guys have a sword. No, I guess maybe it's still a long hilt. Is it still a lance? Maybe they're still anti-large. I'm not sure, but I'll put them at B tier because they've got shields, and I think shields are cool, so we'll put them at B tier. And then you have the War Lions of Trace. Or no, Lion Chariots. Good golly, I keep getting these all mixed up. The Lion Chariots of Trace. And this is, again, one that I tried to play with, and I put it in Alistair's army, and I just hate them. So D tier. Are you sensing a theme here? I'm just not a fan of the War Lions. I want to like them. I think they're cool, but I just, for me, it doesn't cut it. They just aren't great. So there's that. All right, after them we have Dragon Princes, and I actually really like the Dragon Princes as far as cavalry because they can take a beating. I can throw them into melee and forget about them, and they usually tend to survive okay. So I'm actually going to put these guys at A tier, which is shocking for me with cavalry. But again, look at that unit card. Like, look at that. It's just beautiful. They're so awesome. So how can you not like the dragon princes? And then we move on to the missile cavalry and chariots, of which there are only 2. So we've got the Illyrian Reaver archers, which, I mean, maybe they're a step up from the melee variant because I can just put them in skirmish mode and they can run away. But I honestly don't really care about them, so I'm going to put them at C tier. And then you've got the Tyrion chariots, which are basically, in my opinion, like the same thing. So maybe I'll put them in C tier too. Not really a big fan. Don't really care about them. Kind of meh, but if they're in the army, I'll use them, so whatever. So that's it for the cavalry and chariots, and now we're moving on to the monsters. So the first one here is the Great Eagle, which, I'll be honest, I kind of hate the Great Eagle. I don't know, do I hate it enough to put it in D tier? That's a good question. I kind of do hate it. If they die, I really don't go out of my way to recruit them again. They're usually in starting armies as like a flying unit, but yeah, I just think they die too quickly. And maybe I abuse them, which is entirely possible. Like, I probably do abuse them, but I'm gonna put them in D tier because I just hate them. And then you have the War Lions. Finally, I got to the War Lions. So I'm gonna put them in... I'm gonna put them with the rest of the lion stuff. I feel like it's only fair. If their other ones suck, then these guys suck too. I mean, maybe I shouldn't, because these guys are actually... Okay, I'm gonna move them up. Yeah, I'm gonna move them up. Because they're actually not bad at chasing down fleeing units or archers. I have used them that way before. So they are good in that regard. Kind of like your warhound, your chaos warhounds, and shoot, I'm just blanking on the name of the wolf rats for Skaven. They're kind of like that kind of unit. So they're not gonna like rush into melee and win in a 1v1, at least not in my experience, but they are good for doing other things like making sure that units who are broken end up shattering. So I'll put them in C tier. Now we come to the phoenixes, and I do realize it's weird to have the 2 phoenixes and then the 2 dragons and then a phoenix and a dragon, but again, that's how I saw it on the, like, in the game unit, so that's why I have it this way here. So the first one we have is the Flame Spire Phoenix, and I really don't play with the phoenixes outside of the Arcane Phoenix that much. So I think I'm going to put the Flame Spire and then also the the Frostheart Phoenix in C tier. Because yeah, I just really don't use them that much. I think Techless boosts the Phoenixes, maybe just the Arcane Phoenix, I'm not sure. But yeah, when I get to it, this one will be a little bit higher, but for now, these ones, I'm just going to put in C tier. And then I have the dragons. So we have the Sun Dragon, which I actually kind of like playing with the Sun Dragon. So I'm going to put the Sun Dragon in B tier. Don't mind the Sun Dragon at all. And then the Moon Dragon, kind of the same thing. B tier. Pretty standard unit in my opinion. Like, pretty cool, but not like super cool. So goes right there, I guess. And then you've got the Arcane Phoenix, which I really like playing with the Arcane Phoenix. So I put Arcane Phoenix at A tier because they're pretty cool. Especially if you're playing Techless, then they're really cool. And then you've got the Star Dragon, which I'll put up in A tier as well. Because of my Phoenix and Dragon preferences, those two would be my favorite. So if I have a choice, I'm going to go with either one of those two before I go with either of these ones. And then you've got the Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower, which honestly, I think it stinks. Like, I think it's just trash for artillery, so I'm gonna put it in D tier because I hate it. Now, the one thing you'll notice is I usually always have 1 or 2 in my armies just because I feel like artillery is important, but I just think it's garbage. I don't think it is good as far as artillery. I've played way too much Chaos Dwarves and way too much Skaven to know what good artillery is, and I mean, even Cathay in the Empire, all of them have better artillery than the High Elves. Like, of all factions, I feel like High Elves should have better artillery than this, but it is what it is. So D tier for the Eagle Claw Bolt Throwers. And now we're moving on to the heroes. So this is where it's going to be a little interesting because I feel like I don't necessarily have like a good grasp on the different lores of magic. I have the ones that I default to more often, but I think playing Balthazar Gelt lately, I have kind of expanded my thought on some of these. So I just have not played them in High Elf campaigns. So I don't know that I want to necessarily use my experience with Gelt as a determining factor, but I mean, at the end of the day, they all kind of do the same thing. So the first one up we have is the Beasts. So the Beasts Mage, I used to think Beasts, the lore of Beasts was terrible, but now I'm realizing that the Flock of Doom is actually really good, especially early on. So I will put Beasts Mage at B tier because I can't remember if, I think they all get mounts. I believe they all get horses, and then after horses, do they all get flying mounts? I can't remember if they get eagles or phoenixes or what they end up riding, but regardless, I don't think that any of them are great melee combatants, so I'm not going to use that in my judgment. I'm just going to go wholly off of what I think of their spells, and I mean, B tier I think is pretty standard. They really have just a one spell that I use. So, I mean, you almost could make a justification for putting them in C tier, but I'll put them in B tier. So then we have the Lore of Death, which this one I actually have been using a lot more in Gelt. So this is your Spirit Leech and Fate of Buna and Purple Sun. So actually, I think Spirit Leech is really important. That's a good one. So I'm going to put that at A tier. Yep, A tier. Along with the Fire Mage. I'll put them in A tier because they're one I usually recruit early on to get the Burning Head and later on some of the better fire spells. Like the Flame Storm, I think is one, and the Fiery Bolts of something or other. So, fire is usually pretty good. Heavens is also good because that one has your Chain Lightning and your Comet of Kazandora. So I would say probably Heavens is another A tier. I do tend to recruit them quite a bit. They're good damaging, and they've got some good buffs too. So unlike how I have Guild's Army right now, their buffs and debuffs I probably would use more if I have more infantry, especially if I have some of these guys, their buffs would come in handy. And then next we come to the Lore of High Magic, which I think is really funny because when I was looking at the spell browser in the game, it's like all of them are like Lore of Beast, Lore of Death, Lore of Life, etc. And then you come to this one, it's like Lore of High Magic. Like they added magic in there because it just sounds weird to say Lore of High. I'm going to put this one at probably B tier, and this is just because I don't usually play with the Lore of High Magic very often. I even had to look up what the spells are because I'm really not familiar with it very much. So I honestly don't go out of my way to recruit the Lore of High Magic. It's usually if I just get it through a random thing, then I'll embed her in an army and kind of play around with the spells, but I prefer the other Lores of Magic. Next up we have Lore of Life, and I'm gonna put her in S tier because I think Lore of Life is very important, and I love having healing capabilities and some of the buff capabilities like the melee damage reflection. So I think it's important to always have a Lore of Life in my armies just for that healing. And I know that the Lore of High, can do some healing, but like she's just dedicated to healing, and I just find that very important, especially when I'm being really mean to my units and making them do things they probably aren't suited to do. All right, next up we have Lore of Light, and Lore of Light I'm going to put at B tier, probably people would say that it should go higher, especially because it has the net of Ammontok, I think is how you say it, which can basically just like stop units in their tracks. And that actually would be a pretty good combo with the Sisters of Avalon, because it's like Howling Warp Gale, except now that I'm thinking of it, maybe the net doesn't stop flying creatures. Maybe it does, but it also works on grounded creatures, which Howling Warp Gale for the Skaven does not. So if you have somebody charging at you, you can stop them in their tracks, and then you can pepper them with arrows while they're stuck there. So that's why she's not lower. She's at B tier basically for that spell. I really don't play with Lore of Light very often. Next up is Lore of Metal. And Lore of Metal is good, but I think for me, outside of Guilt, I don't play with the Lore of Metal very much. I'm tempted to put Metal at A tier, but I'll probably stick her at B tier, just again because I don't usually play with Metal, Lore of Metal outside of Guilt. Guilt is just kind of like the metal guy. So not bad, has a lot of good spells, but not as good as what Guilt brings to the table, which, I mean, makes sense because he's a legendary lord. So next up we have the last of the mages. We have the Shadows. And I actually really like the Shadows because that's your Pit of Shades and your Penumbral Pendulum, so a lot of good spells there, and then also some buffs, debuffs, which can come in handy. So I would say I tend to favor the Lore of Shadows over some of the other ones. Now we come to the Noble, who I don't usually go out of my way to recruit a noble. I usually get nobles just randomly. The game is like, here's a noble that was recruited for you. So I don't know that the noble is bad, but it's not like my favorite. So maybe, like, I don't know if noble is C tier worthy. I'm tempted. B tier or C tier. I'll do, looking at the other units I've put in C tier, I'll put him in C tier, and you guys can yell at me for that. That's totally fine. Like, I know he's a good, like, overall well-rounded melee foe, but I'm thinking of, like, when I play Tyrion, I have Tyrion, so, like, I don't really need a noble in my army. I want to have more of like the damaging spellcasters or the healing, or the archers. So really, I'm thinking more specifically when I play Tyrion. Like if I have a Lariel, it may be more important to have a melee guy in there, but I tend to default to Tyrion for most of my High Elf campaigns. And next we have the Handmaiden of the Everqueen, and I'm thinking I'm going to put her in S tier. Especially I'm thinking if I play an Alariel campaign, like Handmaidens are super important because they buff your ranged units. They buff the Sisters of Avalon. So if you're going to have a Sisters of Avalon stack with Alariel, you're going to want Handmaidens of the Everqueen. Like, they are very, very important. So I do think she's important enough to put at S tier. And then finally we have the Lore Master of Hoeth. And I'm going to put him probably down here in C tier with the Noble. Again, he's probably good with like a techless campaign, but I really don't recruit them very much. I know he's got a combo of like melee and spells, but I don't know. I usually either go full melee with my legendary lord, like Eltharion. Well, you know, Eltharion has some spells too, but like Tyrion, full melee, or I usually have like full spellcasters. I don't usually mix them, so not bad. I'll play with them if they're there, and if I'm feeling like something different, sometimes I will recruit a lore master, but I don't usually like seek them out. So that is my High Elf tier list. I'm hoping to do more of the factions tier lists in the future, but we'll see how this one is received. There's probably going to be some controversial opinions. And you guys feel free to give me suggestions on armies to play. Like I said, I've never played a Lithanar before. I think he's the only High Elf I've never played. I haven't played Eltharion in too much capacity. Like I haven't really spent a long time on his campaign either. Haven't really played Teclis since he kind of got moved around with Kairos and whatnot down there. So there's a lot of options for me to play. It's just one of those things where, like, if I'm in the mood to play a High Elf, I'm like Tyrion or sometimes Alariel. So it's very difficult for me to branch out, which maybe I should be forced to do that. So if you guys have a good army composition with a legendary lord that you want me to try out, drop that in the comments, and who knows, maybe I will give it a whirl. But that's going to be it for the High Elf tier list. Let me know your thoughts, and I hope you guys will come back and see me in the next video.